LPs running that. Okay, so I'm also the first speaker here. Like I said, I'm Mike Bartley. I'm a local candidate. And I'm really happy that my family could be here. Charlotte, she's over there. I'm going to call her out. My wife, Amanda. And you know, family is really important. It's important to everybody. So, what is a family? You know, family can be anything. And including homosexual people. They couldn't be family members because they couldn't get married. And you know, Mike Pence never wanted that, did everything in his power against that. Joe Biden, he voted for the Defense of Marriage Act. You know, that's just crazy just to say you can't have a family because of the way you act. But in Virginia, we had lots of things more than that you couldn't have a family. Spike's family would have been illegal 50 years ago. And 14 years ago, we had a gay marriage amendment that was on the ballot. And a lot of times the Democrats want to say they're in favor of gay rights. Well, where were they 14 years ago? I'll tell you where they weren't. They weren't at Watkins Precinct from 8 o'clock to 7 o'clock passing out literature against that amendment. I was there. The Libertarians were represented, but they were not. And there's another great thing with families is not separating people so that we can all be together. But we have this war on drugs that has torn so many family members apart. And who really kick-started that war on drugs in the 1980s? Well, it was Joe Biden and his good buddy, Strom Thurmond. Strom couldn't figure out any other way to get America segregated, so he figured, you know what, let's put all of the people I don't like in prison as much as I can and take away their money with this new thing called civil asset forfeiture. You know, Joe Biden thought, well, that's not good enough. So in the 90s, we're going to reform this bill. We're going to make it so this quarter, this amount of crack cocaine can put you in jail for 5 years. 5 years. That's how they feel about families with this terrible war of drugs, which has created an international narco war. And what happens if you're in that narco war? You're fleeing from some terrible country, legitimately seeking from asylum. Donald Trump is going to put your family in prison, separate prisons. Your family will be separated from your family. But what is the libertarian solution? What would you be wasting your vote on a libertarian? Well, Jo Jorgensen will pardon every single federal non-victim crime person on her first day in office, sent them all free to reunite these families. So we've also got some other policies that you might be able to waste your vote on by voting for the major party candidates. First of all, in Virginia, we just decided, because this is $88. I don't know what you would do with $88. You might give it away, you might spend it. You shouldn't want to give it to Amazon. But that's what we did in Virginia. We gave $88 from every man, woman, and child to a large, powerful company for no reason at all. But what does Joe Biden do? Well, he wanted choo-choos, thinking this is the island of Sodor where that's a good idea. And he gave $1 trillion. That's $3,000 from every man, woman, and child to support a failing rail system. I'm not going to bring that much money with me to show that around, even though we do have police. And Donald Trump, he spent all of this money propping up his failing businesses and his friends' failing businesses and putting up tariffs to help all of his buddies. So you can waste your vote on that. Or libertarians, we don't support corporate welfare. If a company's going to fail, let them fail. Then we have the warfare. That's really important to me. It's one of my biggest reasons to be in politics. If you follow Donald Trump's Twitter, he hasn't found a violent act that he doesn't think is appropriate. He's the biggest warmonger, blusterer that I've ever seen in my life. And Joe Biden, for longer than I've been alive, has voted for every military action that America has been involved in. And part of the Obama administration, he even did stuff that nobody voted for. We're still in Syria. We destroyed Libya because of his failed policies. But as a libertarian, we will not continue to spill our blood on foreign soil. We will not waste our money, not waste our blood. Bring the troops home. Medicine is also a big issue. Donald Trump had 2 years where he controlled both houses in the presidency. He could enact whatever he wanted. So what we have right now is Trump care. That's his policy, it's on him. And his opponent, what does he want to do? Well, he thinks that what we have isn't good enough because it's not government enough. We need to add essentially a VA system, a VA option. You know how well that worked when you have the public running it. And add it together. And how well did that work? Well, my friend Jeff, when he had a kidney stone and went his VA healthcare, they did the right thing. They told him to go to the parking lot and dial 911. And if you want that kind of medical care, then you should vote for one of those people. But what do we as libertarians stand for? We look at the world and see who's doing the best and copy it. Singapore has the best medical health outcomes anywhere in the world. And it's at half of the price of the closest competitor of the industrialized world. About a quarter of what we spend on medicine for the best outcome. So maybe we should do Singapore healthcare so that we can all have better lives, live better, and spend less money. And when I'm on spending, how many times do you see in commercials from those D's and R's? I'm gonna spend money on this, spend money on that, spend money on this. I just got a flyer from the Republicans of all the things they want to do, 4 pages, not one thing, not one spending cut. We as libertarians will lower the size of government. We will stop spending. So I implore you, do not waste your vote this November. There are 2 excellent ways to waste your vote. But one excellent way not to waste your vote is you vote for Dr. Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen. So our next speaker is Jafari Jones, Black Lives Matter 757 president. Let's give him a big hand.
Check, 1, 2. Y'all hear me out there? Yeah. How y'all feeling today? Good. Y'all feel good? Y'all feel like voting? Yeah. Y'all feel like winning? Yeah. Anybody want some candy? I don't know, I just throw stuff out there. But yeah, so I'd like to once again want to thank Spike for giving me this opportunity. Thank the Libertarian Party for giving us the opportunity to be out here today. People keep asking us, when it's a little different. A lot of people aren't really exposed to the Libertarian Party and exposed to what's been going on out here. So we at BLM 757 like to look at all angles. We aren't Democrats, we aren't Republicans, we aren't Libertarians. We support what's right. We've been looking at the issues. We've been seeing the influx of individuals coming to our page and giving us a reason to look at Joe Jorgensen. Funny story, funny fact, but not funny at all. The fact that, does everybody here know what this is the 100th year of? Anybody? Huh? Women's right to vote. Let her speak. So, we're sitting here. Everybody saw the debate yesterday. Everybody saw the clown show last week. And everybody's like, oh my God, we have no other options. What are we going to do? Oh my God, we're just running around. Everybody's registered to vote, but we don't know what we can do. Vote for the third party. But that vote for the third party is no, it's not. A vote for Joe Jorgensen is a vote for Joe Jorgensen. And that's how that goes. Point blank period. That's how that rolls. So with this is what perplexed my mind. And a lot of times I'm perplexed. I do stuff I think a lot. I'm a Gemini. And for it to be the 100th year of women having the right to vote, and for them to literally be silencing a woman from being the front runner on the ticket and being on these same stages as these two goons, the pedo and the pussy grabber. I'm sorry, I don't know how live streamed it is out here, but we're just going to stick to the facts. So we want to make sure that individuals are knowing and are aware. We aren't bought by any system. We can't be bought by any system. If you're doing right, we'll be with you. If you're doing wrong, you'll see us. We'll show up. We can show up like this. We can show up how y'all seen us in the past. We definitely support the Second Amendment. We can show up however you need it. So, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Two things that stick out, the same thing in both of them. It's a party. There is no party when there's lives on the line. There is no party when people are dying. There is no party when people are out here suffering. There is no party when people are having their rights constantly infringed upon. So why the party is at the end of that, I'm not even sure. So again, seeing everything that she's been standing up for, all of her talking points, we are highly impressed. Doing the same thing, expecting different results is the actual definition of insanity. So to continue to put your faith in a two-party system that has continued to fail you year after year after year is literally insane. They call other people crazy for this, that, and the third, but if you're literally doing the same thing and you're expecting different results, that's insanity. If I sit up here and start to beat my head on this tree and think this is eventually going to give way, for one, I'm going to be unconscious eventually. But for two, that tree is still going to be there, and it's still going to be the same result. So until we go plant our own tree, plant our own seed, and make sure people can grow from that, we're going to be stuck. That's that take. Sorry, my phone keeps like going black on me. I have like talking points. The lesser of three evils is what I would consider this. They keep saying you have to pick the lesser of two, the lesser of two. I don't think they're evil at all. We don't have any resume of the type of thing. Did y'all see Joe Biden sniffing that little girl on stage? I'm just saying, this stuff creeps me out. And the stuff that people are willing to look past because of some party is baffling to me. So I don't believe it is lesser of three evils. I think certain verbiage put out there on certain news outlets and things of that nature are out there to scare people. It's called scare tactics. People who study psychology and things of that nature know exactly what to say to get a certain reaction out of individuals, and they studied it well. Speaking of studying, Joe Jorgensen is a whole doctor. Not an entertainer. Not some creep that wrote the crime bill. An actual doctor. So, with that being said, CNN for Democrats, Fox News for Republicans, where is the libertarian voice? Why do they not give them a voice? Why do they let them speak out? What are they afraid of? Because generally when people try to hide something, it's usually because they're afraid of the power that it manifests. I see a lot of power out here manifesting. The whole Second Amendment and everything that's falling into line is possible. And like I said, planting the seed right now is very important. They've been literally standing up for everything we've been marching for. We've been in the streets for over 130 some odd days. And myself, this individual here in Richmond, goes by the name of Pops. We've been fighting for this since before George Floyd. I've been an activist for 4 years. And the same lawmakers that we're supposed to be running to support now, literally let us be brutalized in the streets, be arrested, detained, flashbang us, treat us like literal domestic terrorists, lock us up violently and things of that nature. So a vote for the Libertarian Party is a vote for Trump. No, it's not. It's my vote. So with that being said, just a few other things that are going down. I'm going to give it over to the man of the hour. They actually showed up to us. The two-party system is a fraud. Voter suppression is real. Ending qualified immunity and defunding the ATF. That's what we're fighting for. I didn't hear that not one time last night. I didn't hear anything about ending qualified immunity. Giving them be able to come and do whatever they want, come to your house. No knock warrants. Get rid of them. Breonna Taylor, say her name. Don't just say her name and then put the same action for that got her put in the situation she was in the first place. So again, I believe that's my time. Like I said, they showed up for us. I have many more reasons to vote for them, but the fact that they actually showed up to us, the fact they're out here with our marching points, the fact that more people need to know about the Libertarian Party, I will continue to support them as long as they're doing what's right. I will continue to support Spike. I will continue to support Joe. And with that being said, the man of the hour, Mr. Spike Cohen.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Jafari, thank you to Mike, thank you to the Libertarian Party of Virginia, and thank you all for coming out. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you for being here. Who's ready to take back the power? Who's ready to end this Republican crony system? Who here is ready to be freer and happier and healthier and stronger and safer and build a better future for our children and their children and their children? Folks, that's why Joe and I are running for president and vice president. Because we have seen what the Republicans and Democrats have done with their exclusive control of every lever of power in government for over 160 years. They've used it to rob all of you. They've used it to rob you of your power. They've used it to rob you of your freedom. And of course, they've used it to rob you of your money. And they've used it to enrich themselves and the well-heeled, politically connected billionaire cronies who have bought and paid for them to be in office. We recognize as libertarians that the only way we are going to get what we want, the only way that we are going to truly be free, the only way that we are going to truly be prosperous, the only way that we are going to fix the mess that we are in right now is to kick these people out of office and replace them with people who recognize that no one can live your life as well as you can when you have your money and your freedom and your power back. That's why we're libertarians, and that's why we're voting for Joe Jorgensen. Folks, who here is sick and tired of watching their loved ones, their neighbors, maybe even yourselves, sign up to protect and defend the Constitution and the American people against all enemies, foreign and domestic, only to be sent overseas by those domestic enemies to fight and kill and possibly die for the benefit and profit of military contractors and central bankers and foreign dictators and drug cartels? Who is sick of that? And who is sick of those who have gone over there to fight, if they're fortunate enough not to come home in a flag-draped casket, often coming home with major health issues like PTSD and traumatic brain injuries and chronic pain, and being subjected to the worst form of healthcare in this country, the Veterans Administration? Who here is sick and tired of watching the cost of living, everything from housing to healthcare and higher education and everything in between, spiraling out of control because of the Federal Reserve and other disastrous Republican monetary policies? Who here is sick and tired of watching entire communities being destroyed by the war on drugs and other victimless crimes? Who here is sick and tired of watching police brutality and the outright murder of our fellow Americans by an increasingly militarized and increasingly unaccountable police state? And who here is sick of watching that same militarized police state tell you what weapons you are allowed to own to protect yourselves and your loved ones and your communities, while they go and buy whatever weaponry they want and stick you with the bill for it? Who are sick of watching entire industries fleeing, not just here in Virginia, but the entire U.S., and either going overseas or just going out of business because Republicans and Democrats figured out that it works better for their cronies who put them in office if they can just make it increasingly unaffordable to hire you and to do business in America? And folks, who here is sick and tired of a government telling you whether or not you're essential, whether or not you should be allowed to work, whether or not you should be allowed to operate your small business to provide for your family, whether or not you should be allowed to go outside, whether or not you should be allowed to visit your loved ones, whether or not you should be allowed to go to your house of worship or even to the beach or anywhere else, being told to stay home and given $1,200 and told to make that work until further notice, while trillions of dollars are being stolen from you to give to billionaire companies and multinational corporations around the world and stick you with the bill with interest? Who here is sick of a system that was designed to steal from your blood and your sweat and your tears to benefit incredibly powerful and cynical people? Who here is ready to take back that power? Joe and I are running exactly for this reason. That is why Mike is running as well. That is why libertarians are running up and down the ballot in all 50 states and BC. We're not just running to have a third party. We're not just running to have a different politician. We're running to end the Fed and to end the IRS and to end the ATF and to end the DEA and to end the wars overseas and to end warrantless surveillance and to end no-knock raids and to end qualified immunity and to end the war on drugs and to end every bad policy that has come out of the Republican parties for the past several decades. That is why we are voting for Joe Jorgensen. And folks, let's be very clear. The bad outcomes that we are facing are not unintended consequences that we couldn't have possibly known were going to happen. We knew it would happen. This party has been saying it would happen for the 49 years that we existed. We have said that these policies would lead to these outcomes. They knew this would happen, and they did it anyway because they want you to be anxious. They want you to be scared. They want you to be desperate. They want you not to know where your next paycheck is going to come from or whether or not your retirement is secure. They want you to know whether or not, they want you not to know whether or not you're going to be able to pay your rent or your mortgage or your car note They want you to be resentful and angry and at each other's throats. They want you to be hopeless. And they want your spirit to be broken. Because if they can make you hopeless, and if they can break your spirit, then it's that much easier to convince you that all you need to do is just let them take total control. All you need to do is just let them take the rest of your money. Then you'll be safe. Then you'll be happy. Then you'll be healthy. Then you won't have a single thing to worry about. Now, folks, we know that the last people we can trust to get us out of the mess that we are in right now are the exact people who put us in it. This election is far too important to vote for the people who created the mess that we are in. By the way, who here watched that debate last night? Anyone? I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Thoughts and prayers to all of you. We saw what happened last night. We saw why I wasn't on that debate stage, for the same reason that Joe wasn't on that debate stage. Because if the American people had seen someone up there who wasn't just bad-mouthing the other side that they work with every single day, who wasn't just abdicating their own responsibility for the mess that we're in right now, who wasn't just giving empty platitudes and actually introducing real policies that will really change these issues, the American people would vote Libertarian and they'd never vote Republican or Democrat ever again. That is why Joe wasn't on that stage in the middle of that nonsense. That is why the only other thing that was on there between Pence and Harris was that unfortunate fly who was doing the Joe Biden routine with Mike Pence's hair. Folks, before I talk about my running mate, let me talk about the folks that are asking you to throw your vote away for them. Let's talk for a moment about Joe Biden. Oh, you've heard of him. Joe Biden, name a policy you hate: the war on drugs, the endless wars overseas, the Obamacare mandates, gun control, the 1994 crime bill. Name something bad that has happened from DC, and Joe Biden has either helped write it, helped sponsor it, helped vote it into law, or helped oversee its enforcement during his 8 years in the White House. Joe Biden is one of the architects of every bad policy to come out of Washington, D.C. in the nearly 50 years he's been there, when he's not busy sniffing children. And how fitting that the architect of the militarized police state would pick as his running mate one of its most brutal enforcers. Let's talk for a moment about Kamala Harris, who has the distinction of putting away more people in prison for victimless crimes at the state level than any other person alive. Kamala Harris, who at least twice that we know of, intentionally withheld exculpatory evidence in a capital murder case. Let me say that again. At least twice that we know of, Kamala Harris and her DA office tried to have someone executed that they had evidence that suggested that they didn't do it. And not only did they continue to prosecute that person and try to have them executed, she refused to release the evidence. Even in one case, after she was ordered to do so. Why? Because she didn't want her conviction rate to go down. This is who the Democratic Party has asked you to throw your vote away for. Now let's go talk about the other wing of that plane wreck. Let's talk for a moment about Donald Trump. Oh, you've heard of him too. Donald Trump, the lifelong crony, who has used the power of government to benefit himself at the direct expense of everyone around him. Whether we're talking about him using eminent domain to force widows to sell their properties to him to build his next failed casino project, and when that casino project failed, using the bankruptcy courts to push as much of his debt onto his poor shareholders and investors as possible so he could walk away with as much of the profit as possible. This is the man who said that he would drain the swamp, only to become the king of the swamp creatures. He said that he would reduce spending, and instead he has spent more money in one term than any other president before him. This year alone, he has signed off on over $6.6 trillion in spending in 1 year. And there are 2 months left to this year, and he is calling for an additional multi-trillion-dollar stimulus package for his crony buddies. He said that he would end the wars overseas and bring the troops home, and instead, there are 15,000 more troops overseas now than there were when he got into office. He said that he would protect our right to keep and bear arms, and instead he has passed more gun control regulations and executive orders than the last 5 presidents before him, and he has loudly and vociferously pushed for red flag laws in all 50 states, laws that led to the murder of people like Duncan Lemp. And this is who the almost forgot. Talk about his running mate. Let me talk as much about Mike Pence as he has demonstrated relevance during this administration. He had a fly land on his head. This is who the Republican Party has asked you to throw your vote away for. This is who. Yeah, it was great in Johnny Quest. I will give you that. But that was before he ran for office. This is who the Republicans have asked you to throw your vote away for. These are the people who every single election cycle show up and go, hey there, me again. You know all those problems I created? I'm going to solve them, but all I need you to do is vote for me one more time, and I'm going to fix it. Even though I'm actively working to make them worse right now as we speak, if you vote for me one more time, I promise that I'm going to fix it this time. Well, we're not going to throw our vote away. We're not going to waste our vote. Let's talk about an opportunity to vote for something instead of against something. Let's talk about Dr. Joe Jorgensen. Right. Let's talk about a brilliant, self-made entrepreneur. Let's talk about someone who we don't have to worry about whether or not she'll pass a cognitive test. I'm saddened that that's even a thing that we even have to talk about. It's a very low hurdle, but we jump it with great gusto. Joe Jorgensen. Let's talk about someone who has demonstrated in her life of being an entrepreneur and a lecturer and a professor. Let's talk about someone who has demonstrated that she is ready to lead from day one, not from taking control from you, not by trying to control your life, not by trying to rob you, just the opposite, by giving you your control back, by giving you your power and your freedom and your money back where it always belonged. Because as smart as Joe is, she recognizes that she could never tell you how well to live your life better than you can. She can never make decisions for you and your loved ones and families and communities as well as you can, empowered with your money and your ability to make decisions for yourself again, with the barriers and burdens removed that Republicans and Democrats have put in place expressly to make your life harder and to drive up the cost of doing business and the cost of your living, removing all of those things and putting the power back in your hand. Joe Jorgensen knows, the Libertarian Party knows, that the people do best when we are most free. And that is why we are traveling the country. That is why we are campaigning. That is why we are asking for your vote. We don't seek power. I don't want power. I want you to have your power back. Joe wants you to have your power and your money back. That's why we're voting Libertarian. That is why we are voting for Joe Jorgensen. Folks, Joe and I are working with the Libertarian Party, the Libertarian Party of Virginia, and activists around the country. We are working to build an army for human liberty, fighting for a world set free in our time, and we need your help. If you have not already done so, I ask you to join the Libertarian Party today. Go to lp.org and sign up to join today. The Libertarian Party is the only party that is effectively standing as a bulwark against the Republicrats and their aims for you and your loved ones and your future. Let's be very clear. They aren't resting on their laurels. They aren't happy with the amount of control they have in your life. They want more and more and more. They want your life to be harder and harder and harder. They want you to be more and more and more reliant on them. And they want the cost of living to be higher for you. And they want it to be harder for you to get the health care and the education and the housing and everything else that you need to survive. They want your life to be desperate so that you are reliant on them and so that you never stray from the path that they've set for you. And the only party that is, it's okay, I never feel like you can't clap during my speech. And the Libertarian Party is the only party with the organizational structure and the ability to fight back. We are the only party that is on all 50 states plus DC, and we were able to do that during a pandemic. And we are the only party who has actually earned it, because the Republicrats get on there automatically. The Libertarian Party is the army for human liberty, and we ask you to join us. And once you have done that, I ask you to go to joe20.com. That's JO20.com. Now I ask you to sign our volunteer form and sign up to join our team. And if you're able to do so, I ask you to make a contribution. It is your generous donations that allow us to do this bus tour. It allows us to do video ads and radio ads. It allows us to put ads on streaming services. It allows us to take the message directly to the American people every single day across this country. It allows us to do what needs to be done to take the message of human liberty and make it nationwide. This is how we do it. Because folks, unlike our opponents, we don't rob you to pay for our campaigns. You may or may not know this, but the Republicans and Democrats get something called federal matching funds, which is a really nice way of saying that they rob you in income taxes, because as we know, all taxation is theft. I know how to do an applause line. They rob you to help pay for their campaigns. Hundreds of millions of dollars a year they get. And how do they get more money? From crony corporate funding. Hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. The last time I checked, a couple days ago, Joe Biden and Donald Trump had received around $400 million combined in crony corporate funding. Now, folks, I haven't checked today, but the last time I did check, the Jorgensen-Cohen campaign had received exactly $0 and 0 cents in crony corporate funding for two very powerful reasons. Number one, we'd never accept it. Number two, they'd never give it to us because they know that when Joe Jorgensen is in the White House, they know when libertarians are in office up and down the ballot across the country in the federal, state, and local level, they know that their gravy train's over. They know that their days of sauntering into the national capital and state capitals around the country and demanding however many billions or trillions of dollars they got in exchange for putting those politicians in office and just sucking you dry, taking all of your money and sticking you with debt that you have to pay off for the next 40 years with interest, they know all that's over. They know that their days of putting barriers at the regulatory level in place to make it so that you and your small businesses aren't able to grow, that smaller competitors aren't able to compete and threaten their market share, they know that's all over. They know that if they want to continue to remain and do well, they're going to have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and live within their means like they've been telling the rest of us to do. Well, they've been robbing us of trillions of dollars the past several decades. And that is why we are running. That is why we vote Libertarian, is to end that system. That is why Joe Jorgensen is running, because we know that your life is as difficult as it is, that the mess that we are in is as bad as it is because of those cronies and because of those craven, pandering politicians. We, the Libertarian Party, and you are fighting against the cult of the omnipotent state. And that fight begins now. So folks, I'm going to do a bit of Q&A here, and so I invite you, I'm not sure who's got the mic, but we're going to have someone who's going to have a microphone here, and we invite you to come up, and thank you. And this young man here has his mic, and we're going to take the first 5 questions for people to ask here, and then after that we'll be going somewhere, I'm not sure where yet, somewhere around here, and we'll be doing selfies and autographs and all that fun stuff. And if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them when you come up. It'll have to be a shorter answer because I want to make sure everyone here gets a chance to get to meet me and talk with me. I'd hate for someone to come all the way here and not get a chance to talk with me. But we will be taking the first 5 questions from people that come up here, and I would be happy to take them now. But while we're waiting for the first person to come up, I want to say again, as I said, Joe and I are fighting to create a human army for human liberty, fighting for a world set free in our time. And I believe that our time is now. And I thank you for coming. Any other questions? Hey, come on up.
Well, I figured I might as well start with one of the heavy hitters. What is your position on serial killers? Are you in favor of the death penalty, or do you think that they should be locked up on the taxpayers' dollar for the rest of their lives?
That's a great question. Here is the issue with the death penalty. We have seen how the death penalty gets used. It is often used against those who are the least able to defend themselves. We were talking about the death penalty before. If it were up to Kamala Harris, there would be 2 people who were accused of heinous government power to decide who lives and who dies in that way, rather than locking them up and protecting the public from them. Is that if and when they either mess up or intentionally put away someone, there's no way to get that back. If someone is accused of serial murder and it turns out they didn't do it, and they either were railroaded or there was just a big mistake that happened and a miscarriage of justice either way. Whether it's 5 years later, 10 years later, 15 years later, if that person's still alive, they can be set free. It doesn't give them their years that they lost back, but they can at least be set free. We don't believe that the government should have the ability to say who lives and who dies like that. And even though it will in times lead to someone being locked up who did something egregious and kept away from the public and it's at taxpayer expense, the cost or the potential of someone dying, and it happens many times that people have been executed and found later to have not done it, that cost is too high. Earlier this year, there was a man named Nathaniel Green. He was accused of murdering 3 police officers, even though they never even tried to say that he did the killing. Someone else did the killing, and the person who did the killing said that he had nothing to do with it. He said Nate had nothing to do with it. The sole bit of evidence that the police department in Alabama had that Nate Green had killed or been a part of the killing of these officers was that he had yelled at them a few hours earlier. That was literally the only evidence that they presented. Nate Green was executed back in either April or May. That is what happens when you give the power the ability to decide whether we live or die. Government often uses its powers against the most marginalized among us. And if one of those powers it has is deciding who lives and dies, they often kill people that didn't have the wherewithal to defend themselves and didn't do anything wrong. Thank you. You have another question? Yeah, come on up.
I just wanted you to expand on your healthcare, like your ideas for the new healthcare or something like that.
Yeah. So healthcare is a mess in this country. I probably didn't need to tell you that. Thanks for coming, folks. No, healthcare is a huge mess in this country. We didn't need the COVID-19 pandemic to tell us that this system was a nightmare. Our government spends, at the federal and state level, our government spends more money per taxpayer, per patient, than almost any other country on earth. There are like 2 or 3 other countries that spend more money per taxpayer than the US government. That does not include what you are paying out of pocket, obviously. Again, I didn't have to tell you that either. This is a costly mess of a system that is getting so expensive that even people who are on subsidized health insurance are increasingly finding themselves unable to afford health care. We have a system in this country whereby everyday Americans are scared, horrified at the thought of ending up with a chronic illness and never being able to get the care that they need because they can't afford it, or horrified at ending up in an emergency room and being ruined financially for it for years afterwards. Why do we have this system? Because cronies put politicians in office who put regulations and taxes and mandates and red tape in place that drove up the cost of healthcare, kicked out a bunch of people from being able to afford to provide it, and drive up the cost as a result of that for their direct benefit and their profit. Here's a perfect example of that. In most countries, things like insulin and epinephrine cost pennies. They should cost pennies here. They are drugs that have been around since before any of us have been alive, since before many of our parents and grandparents had even been alive. And yet, here, companies, big pharma companies, are able to weaponize patents and keep patents on drugs that have been around for, in some cases, a century or longer. And they are able to charge whatever they want for 2 reasons. Number one, they have that patent protection, so competitors can't come and make a more affordable version of it. And number 2, because the majority of their customers aren't paying directly and instead are paying through government mandated insurance and Medicare and Medicaid, it's those companies that have to decide what they're willing to pay. And they're fine with paying those amounts because there's another law in place. This gets kind of confusing, so keep with me here. There's another law in place that says that insurance companies have to spend 80% of the money that comes in on actual healthcare services. So by allowing the price of healthcare services to go up, that allows them to increase the 20% that they get to keep. Everyone involved in your healthcare, with the exception of really your doctor for the most part, has a vested interest in driving up the cost so that they can profit off of your backs and not giving you an alternative. A recent study showed that 75% of the cost of healthcare was nothing more than the cost of complying with various red tape and taxes and mandates and regulatory burdens that come from Medicare, Medicaid, and government mandated insurance. Now keep in mind, that's not the cost of providing those services, that's the cost of proving compliance. When you walk into a hospital and you see one or two doctors and a handful of nurses and dozens of administrators, and then you don't see the hundreds and thousands of other administrators working in insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies and government agencies, all of that is what is driving up the cost of your health care. And it was done intentionally for two reasons: to benefit the cronies that put them in office, and to eventually make you throw up your hands and go, okay, fine, just take over the whole thing. I know it's not going to be good. I've seen what the VA is like. It's a total nightmare, but I can't afford it. Just take the whole thing over. And as I said before, those are the last people we can trust to fix this. The answer, as always, is get the government out of it. Get that red tape out of it. Get those regulations out of it. Get those taxes and mandates out of it, so that the price equilibrium comes into place, and now those doctors are going to charge what you can actually afford, because no one else is paying it, because there isn't some massive bureaucracy leviathan standing behind you that's doing the paying. And also, by removing that leviathan, by removing those patent protections, by removing those mandates and taxes and other red tape and burdens, now it's just you and the doctor. There isn't some invisible army of thousands of bureaucrats that have to be paid off before you can even find out what the service costs. Now it's just your medical providers and you determining what you need and what you can afford. That is what true affordable healthcare looks like, and it will only happen when we kick the Republicans and their absurd policies out of office. Hey, how are you doing?
What are you going to be doing about student loans and the trillions of dollars around them?
With student loans? Thank you. That's a good question. So let's get to the core of something here. Well, no, I'll do that first. So student loans. Here's the biggest issue with student loans. For whatever reason, the government has decided that student loans are different from literally any other debt you take on, in that you cannot effectively go bankrupt if you can't afford it. Any other loan that you get, a mortgage, a car loan, just any kind of debt that you get, if you're able to demonstrate in court that even to the best of your ability you are unable to afford it, you are able to get that loan discharged. There are only two kinds of debts that you can't get rid of. Debts that you owe the government, tax debts, which are all theft, and we would get rid of those as well, because you should have never owed them that in the first place. You don't owe someone who puts a gun to your head. And also student loans. So one powerful way to deal with student loans is simply to change it so that you can actually discharge those loans in bankruptcy if you can't afford it. 40% of the people that have gotten student loans dropped out. They didn't get the job that they were originally going to go in for. They're now working, whatever. That's the way to deal with that in the short term. But we also have to look at the reason why the cost of healthcare, or the cost, well, healthcare too, why the cost of higher education is so expensive in this country in the first place. Prior to the federal government getting involved in higher education facilities had to do what's called the price equilibrium. And this is in all things. If I have a thing that you need, and I know that if I charge this much, I can get enough people who afford it to buy it from me and I can turn a profit. But if I charge this much, there will be enough people who can't afford it that I won't be making a profit anymore. I have to charge what people can afford. That is what universities used to have to do. Then the federal government came in to save the day, and they introduced limits, which were actually much higher than what they were already charging, and said these are the limits of what you can charge. And it was way higher than they were ever charging, far more than anyone could afford. They then turned around and said, but we'll help underwrite these with loans and with grants. And it reached a point where universities were now getting most of their tuitions directly from the government. So they no longer had to worry about whether students could afford it or not, because they were getting paid directly from the government, from the taxpayer. This led to, and has continued to lead to, increasingly skyrocketing higher education costs. It eventually reached a point where private student loan lenders said, we're not going to give loans out at these rates. These students will never be able to make enough money to pay this back. They're not, the wages for these types of jobs that they're going to be getting aren't nearly high enough to pay this. We're not going to do it anymore. So the federal government stepped in and effectively nationalized student loans, so that now They give out loans for whatever the universities say they need, and they make sure that you have to pay it off, even if you are effectively bankrupt. So yes, we make it so that students are able to go bankrupt the way that anyone else could for any other type of loan that they've taken out. And then we also get rid of the federal involvement in higher education in the first place, which drove up the cost of education to begin with. By doing that, it brings down the cost of what the students can actually afford, and we also get the private lenders back into it, because they're not going to lend out, especially if they know that you can effectively get out of it by going bankrupt. They're not going to lend you for a tuition that's more than what you can effectively expect to be able to pay off in an affordable way. Thank you. Hey, how are you doing?
Hi, doing pretty good. I'm rewinding a little bit to the healthcare issues. I have 2 daughters who are disabled.
Okay.
And so I'm wondering, under a Jorgensen administration, what kind of protections do they have as far as pre-existing conditions for when we can't take care of them and they have to be on their own? Because that's something I definitely, they're 10 and 8.
Right.
And so that's something, I'm disabled myself, we worry about what's going to happen with them with their pre-existing conditions
Of course.
as we move forward.
Absolutely, of course, and thank you for that question. And it's a very important thing. It's obviously an incredibly important thing to you. You're disabled, you have 2 children that are disabled.
Yeah.
It's important to me too. I have multiple sclerosis. Not everyone knows that. I have MS. And it is important to me that I am able to get the care that I need, which in many times is not very affordable, because I have a disease that isn't incredibly common, and that requires some incredibly expensive medication to be able to cover it. Here is the issue. We are looking at the end problem instead of the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem is that government involvement in the market is what drove it up to be unaffordable in the first place. We all have we all have a pre-existing condition called hunger. And yet, at no point do any of us say, but wait a second, why is government not making sure that the grocery stores are charging what I can afford because of my hunger? Because we largely understand that grocery stores, to an extent, have to charge what we can afford. Thank God they're not more involved, or else we wouldn't be able to afford it. We'd be in a breadline situation. We have that breadline situation with healthcare. By getting government as much out of it as possible, and by getting that price down to the equilibrium, the health insurance companies have to charge. The medical providers have to charge what you can actually afford. They have to cover what you actually need, or they're not going to have customers. There are millions, tens of millions of Americans with pre-existing conditions. This pandemic is creating millions more who will survive and have pre-existing conditions. It is a market that they will not be able to ignore. Now, with that said, I don't know your situation, but there are people that are on various social safety nets, state insurance programs for children, Medicaid, Medicare, and things like that. Long-term libertarians believe that the best way to deal with these things is through charity and mutual aid, and that these services are substandard and cost more than the actual benefits they're giving. In the short term, our concern is not with removing the social safety nets, at least not in this moment. It's not the right time to do that. Our concern is with putting ladders back so that enough Americans can actually climb out of those nets if they're able to do so. And for those who can't, that is not our priority to get rid of those safety nets. But long term, our plan is to bring the cost of healthcare down so that you're not worried about whether it's covering it or not, because you can afford it. Thank you. And I'm not sure, is this number 4 or number 5? This is number 5? Okay, so we'll take this last question and then we'll start doing selfies and all. Hey man, how are you doing?
Good. So, to preface, I'm an ANCAP. But I think for many people who are new to libertarianism, one hurdle for them is the drug war and ending the drug war, legalizing all drugs. So, how would a libertarian approach deal with ending the drug war? So, how would the drug war and violent crimes in communities and legalizing all drugs, how would that affect our communities?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a fantastic question. The 2 biggest concerns that I face when I tell people that we're going to end the drug war on all drugs is, how are we going to stop people from getting addicted and overdosing and abusing drugs, and how are we going to stop violent crime? I'll answer the first question. Actually, they really are both answered the same way. A little bit of background about me. I have been sober for 14 years. Okay? I honestly didn't say that, but thank you. I appreciate that. That wasn't why I brought it up. I didn't bring it up to get applause or toot my own horn. I bring it up to put in perspective where I come from. I don't think doing drugs is a good idea. I don't think drinking alcohol is a good idea. I don't think smoking cigarettes is a good idea. It's nothing I would do, and it's nothing I would recommend to anyone else. The reason that we need to end the drug war is because we see that it has made everything worse. It has made addiction worse. It has made crime worse. It has made corruption in government worse, and here's how. We don't even need to look at this current drug war to tell us how. We can look at what happened in the 1920s with the ban on alcohol. Back then, in the US, there was a large group called the Temperance Movement that said alcohol is bad. If you drink alcohol, you're likely to get addicted. A lot of people overdose from drinking alcohol and die. Many of people who drink typically have higher rates of spousal abuse and homelessness and unemployment and so forth. It leads to a lot of bad social things, and frankly, alcohol is just bad. It's not morally right. And so based on that, they made alcohol illegal. Here's what immediately happened. Addiction got worse because now people who had an addiction problem with alcohol couldn't get any help, because if they told anyone that they were an alcoholic or had an alcohol problem, they'd go to jail. And if anyone heard that someone had an alcohol problem, they could potentially go to jail for being an accessory to a crime. Here's the other thing that happened. A multi-billion-dollar industry was handed to criminals. It was handed to what were previously two-bit criminals who largely made money on the protection racket and running numbers, and now they were given a multi-billion-dollar business. And they became some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in this country. We think about people like Al Capone. We think about people like Joe Kennedy. These were former two-bit hoods who ended up running entire sections of the country. And what did they do with that money? They engaged in violent turf warfare against each other. Interesting side note there, the very first gun control law that happened at the national level was the National Firearms Act. It happened in response to the gangland warfare. Typical government logic. Our war on alcohol has led to criminal cartels fighting each other in the streets for turf back instead of just allowing, companies to sell alcohol. The problem here is guns. That's government logic. But back to this. The other thing that they did besides engaging in violent turf war was buy off politicians and pay off corrupt officers and put their preferred politicians in place, which led to more government corruption across the board. It's a good thing we got rid of the war on alcohol, otherwise we'd be dealing with that right now. Actually, we are dealing with that right now with the war on drugs. The exact same things are happening right now. Addictions are worse because addicts are being treated like criminals instead of people who have health problems who need help. Criminal gangs are given the ability to make hundreds of billions of dollars, so that you have people like El Chapo and other people who are effectively the most wealthy and powerful people in the private sector around the world. You have out of control crime and increasing crime and murder and everything else. You have gangland warfare. You have every single problem that we were told the drug war was in response to deal with. It is making it worse. We don't want to end the drug war because we think everyone should be stoned out of their minds all the time. If you want to do that, that's up to you. That's fine if you want to. Not saying don't. I'm just saying that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because we want addicts to get the help that they need instead of being thrown in prison and having their lives ruined. We want cartels and gangs to be disempowered and off our streets. We want safer streets. We want fewer addicts. We want fewer people with chronic homelessness issues because of drug addiction. We want people to get the help that they need, and we want criminals to have one less way to make money. That's why we want to end the war on drugs. Thank you. So folks, with that, we will be, wherever they tell me to go, we will be doing the selfies and everything else. But I just want to close by saying this. I often tell you that you are the power. I say, I'm Spike Cohen, and you are the power. And what I mean by that, when I say that you are the power, I'm not pandering to you. I would never pander to such a brilliant, smart, intelligent, attractive. You look amazing, by the way. Fantastic. Have you been working out? I see it, man. I totally see it. I see your gains too. No, I'm not pandering. When I say that you are the power, I mean that you have the power. We have the power working together to change all of this. And you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to the Republicans. When they shame you, and try to tell you you have to vote for them. You have to pick the lesser evil and just keep getting more evil. What is it they tell you? You can't vote third party. If you vote for third party, you'll ruin everything we've done. Yeah, that's the point. But they're telling you something there. They don't want you to feel empowered by that statement, but you should, because they're telling you the truth. When you vote Libertarian, when you reach out to your loved ones and your neighbors and tell them and give them an opportunity to vote for someone instead of against someone else, when you tell them how maximizing human liberty is the source and the solving of the problems that we are facing, when we build the movement necessary to win, not just the White House, but every single office up and down the ballot in all 50 states, we will dismantle what they have built. We will take that power and that freedom and that wealth. You can start clapping. You will take that power and that freedom and that wealth that they have robbed from you and put it back in your hands, the people's hands, where it always belonged. That is what we are working for every day. That is what Joe is working for. That is what I am working for. That is what the Libertarian Party working for. And that is what all of you are working for. Now let's go win this thing. Thank you. Here we go.
Okay. So, I guess first things first, if you want to get a picture or a sign with Spike's going to be over by that sign
live
over
right
there.
now. It's called the live stream.
All the VIPs I need to bring over to the sound table. And I got one of these. This is a Libertarian card. You guys sign up online to get one. I'd encourage everyone to do so if you haven't already. It's $25, I think. Best money you can spend. And then also, I got donations. If anyone's willing to donate to the campaign, go ahead. If you're willing to make a large donation, you can get my signed hat by Joe and Spike. So come on over. Go see, like right in front of the sign over there is where we're trying to have all the people sign up to go see.
Yeah, exactly.
Spike. And if you,
Sorry?
Did you catch Mike getting arrested?
Oh yeah, I already posted the video of it.
If
But
you're
I was
looking
going
for
to
the
ask
jar,
you,
come on over
maybe
and see
once
me.
he stops talking, do you want to do a quick interview on the live stream here? And all right, I think he stopped.
Oh, okay.
You safe out there.
Thanks, bro.
I'd love for you to introduce yourself and just talk to me about. I think that people might be surprised. Black Lives Matter, Libertarian. Tell me about what you're doing here.
Well, allow for me to reintroduce myself. My name is actually Ho. It's H to the O-V. I'm just joking. I'm not Jay-Z at all. But so my name is Jafari Jones. I'm a BLM 757. And pretty much what we wanted to do is come out here and show people that there are other options. People keep saying that there's only, two out of the lesser of two evils, and there's literally a whole entire choice that's on every ballot in all 50 states. And we think to be silencing a woman on the 100th year of women being able to vote is egregious, and it's a slap in the face to quote-unquote democracy and the political process in itself. We want to be able to make sure people are exposed to the other side, be able to have the questions answered, any type of questions and things of that nature they may have. So just come get it answered. Don't go off of, this is a media headline. Don't go off of media headlines and put people in a box. People put us in a box for a long time. It took us 4 years for people to finally realize that's just here locally. So just imagine what it's going to take to penetrate the rest of the United States. And we're here willing to fight that fight. We as black people have a very 400 years of fighting us. So we're all for it. We're tired of doing the same thing, expecting different results. Tired of being used, particularly by the Democrats, every election season, literally just to pander us for votes, coming to the biggest black church the Sunday before the Tuesday of elections, and that's been the process. We've seen that process continually. They use us up, they use our following, and once they're elected, can't pick up the phone, or we're busy, or in a meeting.
Any remaining volunteers who would like to help with teardown, please report to the sound table. Volunteers at the sound table.
And not just being stuck in the bubble of two-party system.
Can you talk about what issues sort of draw you to Cohen and Jorgensen?
They've literally been speaking on every issue that we've been fighting for, as far as ending qualified immunity, as far as taking away all the power from the government, and as far as ending no-knock warrants. Literally everything we've been marching for, taking the power, giving the power back to the people. That's why we're out here. We definitely know that there's a lot of flaws. COVID-19 exposed a lot of how the government will come and literally make laws in a blink of an eye, and we're just supposed to comply or go to jail. Even here today, being infringed upon their rights, and it's been seen. And the longer we're in it, the more you'll be able to see the people, the government will, the more rights you give them, the more they'll take from you.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Pops, did you have anything to add?
No, he said everything. He said everything I believe in. So yeah.
All right.
Talk about how beautiful these gentlemen look today.
Fair enough.
Hey man, shout out to News and Share, man. We saw y'all up there to get the strap rally. So you still live?
Yeah, I am still
Okay,
live.
so,
Thank
man, we up there to get the strap to a rally. I say you definitely, fought everything up there. But just thank you for being out here and capturing all sides. Very important, non-biased. Get it out there. Even let's cursing.
Yeah, no, yeah, the one outlet that does, I don't bleep out anything. You know, people can use whatever kind of language they want.
You just put it out there. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? You put it out there. You don't put your spin on it. You don't put, any type of narrative on it. You put it out there what's actually happening while it's actually happening.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely, brother.
They can visit us on BLM757.org. Our official website, you can see our mission statement, what we stand for, all the petitions that we have. We'd be remiss if we didn't say free Matthew Russian, justice for India Kager, justice for William Chapman. We represent about 10 families here. That's the reason why the 757 was formulated, because we have a lot of things going on here locally. So if you'd like to get involved, follow us on social media at BLM757 on both Twitter and Instagram, Black Lives Matter 757 on Facebook, BLM757.org. Together, we can achieve so much more.
Awesome. Thanks. Really appreciate it.
People understand that in Newport News, we want to Newport News, Newport News just arrested black guys.
Yeah, get where you need to be, bro.
Yeah, no worries.
I thought he wasn't supposed to be back in Virginia in November. Where was he with
Okay, so while Spike is doing autographs and stuff like that, I'm actually going to cut the live stream here. But I assume that he'll be up for doing an interview afterwards. So whatever interview I get with him, I will post in full later tonight. So stay tuned, like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I will have more HD footage from this event, as well as probably an interview with Vice Presidential candidate Spike Cohen after this.